The bull they called Wrecking Ball had been standing on broken feet for 2 years, and nobody knew it. That's the part that made Theodore Wiley sick when he finally saw it. Not angry. Sick. The deep nausea that happens when a man who understands animals realizes that what everyone has been calling aggression, what 3 handlers and a veterinarian and an auction house and an entire county had labeled as a dangerous animal, was pain. Ordinary, treatable, invisible pain, hiding in plain sight inside 4 hooves that hadn't been looked at since the bull was a yearling. Theodore was 58. He lived on 90 acres in Vinton County, Ohio, the Appalachian foothills southeast of Chillicothe, where the terrain is steep and the farms are small, and the people have been making do with not quite enough for so long that making do became a skill, and not quite enough became a lifestyle. He'd been around cattle his whole life, not as a breeder, not as a rancher in the Western sense, as a hoof man. His father Henry had been a farrier, not horses, cattle. A rare trade even 50 years ago and nearly extinct now. Henry Wiley had traveled a 5-county radius in southeastern Ohio trimming hooves on dairy cattle and beef bulls at a time when farmers understood that hooves were the foundation of everything and spent money on them the way they'd spend money on a barn roof. Because when the foundation fails, everything above it falls. Henry taught Theodore to trim at 14. By 16, Theodore could read a hoof the way a mechanic reads an engine. By sound, by feel, by the way the animal moved. A slightly short stride on the left front meant sole pressure. A head bob at the trot meant heel pain. A reluctance to turn meant the outside claw was bearing too much weight. The language of hooves is specific and consistent and completely invisible to anyone who hasn't spent years learning to hear it. Theodore trimmed cattle professionally for 22 years, built a business covering 5 counties. Then the farm started closing. Hoof care became the line item that got cut when budgets got tight. The thing that could wait until next year. Except next year the damage was structural and the animal was lame and the farmer was calling the vet because the problem had graduated from maintenance to emergency. Theodore still trimmed, but the calls were fewer. He ran 40 Angus cross cows and a bull on his 90 acres to keep the lights on. His wife Linda worked at the hospital in Chillicothe. The bull showed up at the Vinton County sale barn on a Saturday in October. He wasn't in the catalog. He was a late addition, a consignment that arrived the night before from a farm in Hocking County that had dispersed its herd after the owner's death. The estate had hired a livestock hauler to transport the remaining cattle to auction. Most of them were cows. The bull was an afterthought, loaded last, hauled alone in a separate compartment because nobody wanted to share a trailer with him. His tag said Lot 67, a 5-year-old Simmental Angus cross, dark brindle with a stripe of gray running down his spine, 1,700 pounds, big enough to make the pen he was standing in look small. The auction staff had put a warning on the catalog entry, consignor reports aggressive behavior, handle with extreme caution, will be sold as is with no guarantees on temperament or soundness. The auctioneer read the warning before the bidding opened. The room adjusted. The way rooms adjust when a dangerous animal enters. Men moved back from the rail. A few stood up. The energy went from casual to cautious in about 3 seconds. Lot 67 walked into the ring, and immediately, everyone understood the warning. The bull's head was low, not in the relaxed way that grazing bulls carry their heads. Low and tight, the posture of an animal whose neck muscles are locked against constant input from somewhere below. His eyes were wide, not wild, fixed. The hard stare of a creature that is processing pain so continuously that everything in its visual field has become a potential threat. He moved stiffly. Short strides, hesitation on the turns. The kind of movement that an experienced horseman would recognize instantly as lameness. But that the average cattleman reads as caution or aggression because the vocabulary for bovine lameness doesn't exist in most sale barns. When the ringman approached to position him for the buyers, the bull swung his head. Fast, not a charge, a sweep. The wide defensive arc that pain-reactive animals use to create space when something moves into their discomfort zone. The ringman jumped back. The crowd murmured. Opening bid, 1,800. Silence, 1,200. One hand. A meat buyer from Ross County who purchased cull bulls for slaughter weight. Theodore was in the 7th row. He hadn't planned to bid on anything. He'd come to sell 3 cull cows from his own herd. Thin, old cows that had raised their last calves and earned their trip through the ring. But he was watching lot 67. Not the way the rest of the room was watching, with the wariness of people evaluating danger. Theodore was watching the feet. The right front hoof was visibly overgrown. The toe was long, curling slightly upward, forcing the bull to rock back on his heels with every step. The left front was worse. The outside claw was flared, and the inside claw was carrying compensatory weight, which meant the sole on the inside was likely bruised or abscessed. The back feet were harder to see from the 7th row, but the movement told the story. The shortened stride, the reluctance to push off the rear, the slight hitch at the walk that said, "Something is wrong in the heel or between the claws on at least one hind foot." Theodore had seen this 1,000 times in his career. A bull with bad feet hurts every step he takes. Every step reinforces the pain. Every reinforcement heightens the stress response. The stress becomes chronic. The chronic stress becomes aggression. Not because the animal is mean, but because pain that never stops makes everything threatening. A ring man walking toward him isn't a handler. It's a source of potential additional suffering, and the only tool a bull has to manage suffering is his head and his weight. Every person in this room thinks that bull is dangerous, Theodore thought. That bull is in pain. And nobody's looked at his feet. The meat buyer's bid stood at $1,200, going once, going twice. Theodore raised his hand. $1,300. The meat buyer glanced at him. Raised to 14. Theodore went to 15. Sold. $1,500. Linda was going to ask questions. Theodore would deal with that later. Right now, he had a 1,700-pound bull with at least 4 compromised hooves and a reputation for violence that was going to make loading him an event. It took 40 minutes to get lot 67 on the trailer, 4 men with sorting panels. The bull swept his head at anyone who came close. The wide defensive arc of an animal clearing its space. Not targeting anyone, just protecting the body that was hurting him. Theodore watched the movement and diagnosed before the bull reached the ramp. At least 2 compromised hooves, probably all 4. The aggression is protective. Remove the pain. Remove the behavior. He drove the bull home. The bull came off the ramp and stood in the holding pen with the stiff posture of an animal that has learned to minimize movement because movement costs. Linda came out, looked at the bull. "What is that?" 1,700 pounds of Simmental cross with the worst feet I've seen in 40 years. He's also in agony. Look. He's rocking, weight shifting every 3 seconds. That's a bull trying to take pressure off his soles because standing still hurts as much as walking. You paid $1,500 for a bull in pain that nobody can get near. I paid $1,500 for a bull that everybody misdiagnosed. Theodore didn't try to work on the bull that day. Or the next day. Or the day after that. He spent 3 days watching, sitting on a bucket outside the pen. The same bucket his father Henry had sat on at 1,000 farms. The hoof man's throne. Day 1. The bull stood in the far corner, head low, eyes fixed on Theodore. The defensive posture of an animal that associates humans with handling, and handling with pain. Theodore sat for 2 hours. Didn't enter the pen. Day 2. The bull moved to the center. Closer. Not approaching. Repositioning. Recalculating. He was eating from the hay ring when Theodore arrived. Didn't stop eating. Day 3. Theodore entered the pen. He walked to the hay ring. Stood beside it. The bull was eating 5 feet away. His head came up, eyes on Theodore. The body tensed. The preparation for the sweep. The head started to turn. Theodore didn't move, didn't back up, didn't step forward. Stood still and breathed, low and slow, the way his father had taught him to breathe around cattle that expected humans to be sudden and loud. The bull's head stopped mid-turn. The sweep didn't complete. His ears rotated from flat, threat, to forward, attention. He looked at Theodore, looked at the hay, looked at Theodore again. Then he lowered his head and went back to eating. Theodore stood beside a 1,700-pound bull that the sale barn had flagged as aggressive and the bull ate hay 3 feet from him without raising his head again. The trim happened on day 5. Theodore called his friend Jack Curtis, a large animal vet from MacArthur who'd worked with him on hoof cases for 20 years. They set up a portable tilt table in the pen, a hydraulic platform that rotates a standing animal onto its side for hoof work. Theodore led the bull onto the platform with range cubes. The bull froze when he felt the surface under his feet. Theodore talked to him, not words, tone. The low, continuous sound his father made in 1,000 barns. The bull stepped on. Theodore activated the tilt. The platform rotated slowly. The bull's weight shifted. His legs extended. And for the first time in what Theodore estimated was 2 years, the full weight came off all 4 feet simultaneously. The bull exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that shook his entire body, the sound of an animal that has been standing on pain for so long that the absence of it is overwhelming. Jack looked at the feet. "My God," he said. The right front hoof had a toe that was 3 inches overgrown. The sole underneath was concave, hollowed by abnormal pressure distribution. A stone the size of a marble was lodged between the claws, impacted so deeply that the tissue around it had formed a calcified pocket. The stone had been there for months, maybe a year. The left front was worse. The outside claw had a vertical crack running from the coronary band to the sole, a full-thickness wall crack that flexed with every step, pinching the sensitive laminae inside. The crack was infected. Dark fluid seeped from the base when Jack probed it. The inside claw had a sole abscess that had been draining through the heel, a chronic infection that produced constant throbbing pressure. The back feet. The right rear had an interdigital growth, a fibroma, a mass of proud flesh between the claws that had been compressed with every step, creating a pain response that made the bull reluctant to push off his hind end. The left rear was overgrown but structurally sound underneath, the only foot that wasn't actively causing suffering. 3 feet in critical condition, 1 in need of maintenance, on an animal that had been standing and walking and breeding and being handled for 2 years with the equivalent of walking barefoot on broken glass. "Theodore," Jack said quietly, "this bull has been in agony for, I don't even want to estimate how long." Theodore was already working, hoof knife in his right hand, nippers in his left. The tools his father had given him when he was 14, the same brand, the same weight, handles worn to the shape of Jessup hands over 2 generations. He started with the right front, trimmed the overgrown toe back to proper length and angle, used the nippers to rebalance the claw height, then went after the stone. It came out with a pair of forceps and a sound that made Jack wince. The wet pop of calcified tissue releasing something that had been embedded in it for over a year. The bull flinched when the stone came out, then went still, completely still. The kind of still that happens when a source of pain so constant that the body forgot it existed suddenly stops. Theodore moved to the left front. The wall crack required more work. He cut a horizontal groove above the crack to stop it from propagating upward, cleaned the infected tissue with dilute iodine, packed the base with a medicated hoof putty that would seal the crack and protect the laminae while it grew out. The abscess on the inside claw was drained and flushed and packed, the right rear fibroma. Jack handled this one, a surgical procedure that required removing the excess tissue with a scalpel and cauterizing the base, local anesthetic, clean margins, a wrap that would need changing in a week, total procedure time, 2 hours and 40 minutes. The bull lay on the tilt table through all of it. His eyes were half closed. His breathing was even. The animal that the sale barn had flagged as aggressive was lying on his side while 2 men worked on his feet with knives and forceps and a scalpel. And he wasn't fighting, wasn't sweeping, wasn't doing any of the things that had terrified 3 handlers and an auction barn. Because for the first time in 2 years, nobody was asking him to stand on what was hurting him. Theodore lowered the tilt table. The bull's feet touched the ground. He stood, shifted his weight, and Theodore saw the moment it happened. The rocking stopped. The constant rhythmic weight shifting that had defined the bull's posture since Theodore first saw him in the ring stopped. The bull stood square. Weight distributed evenly across 4 feet that were For the first time in years, not sending pain signals with every ounce of pressure, the bull took a step, then another. His stride was longer. The stiffness was gone. The head came up, not in the low, tight, defensive posture of an animal bracing against suffering. Up. The way a bull carries his head when the world isn't hurting him. He walked across the pen, turned, walked back. Each step fluid in a way that 1,700 pounds of brindle Simmental cross shouldn't be capable of after 2 hours of hoof surgery, but was, because the surgery didn't add anything to the animal. It removed something, and what it removed had been weighing more than the bull himself. Jack stood at the fence watching. 20 years of veterinary practice. He'd seen cattle respond to treatment thousands of times. But this was different. This wasn't recovery. This was revelation. The bull they were watching walk across the pen wasn't a different animal than the one in the sale ring. He was the same animal, minus the pain. Theodore. That bull hasn't moved like that in years. Theodore was cleaning his tools, the hoof knife, the nippers, the handles worn to his hands and his father's hands before him. He's been moving like that the whole time, Theodore said quietly. Inside, where nobody could see it. The pain was on top. We just took the pain off. The weeks confirmed what the tilt table revealed. Theodore named him Bishop, because a bull that suffered that long without anyone noticing deserved a name with weight. Bishop stopped sweeping within 2 weeks. Without pain driving constant stress, his nervous system down-regulated. His eyes softened from the hard fixed stare to a calm scanning gaze. He let Theodore walk beside him in the pen, then in the pasture, then at the hay ring with the cows. Jack came for a follow-up at 6 weeks. The crack was growing out clean, the abscess sealed, the fibroma healed, the sole remodeling to normal curvature. He's sound, Jack said. All 4 feet. How many bulls do you think are out there right now labeled as dangerous because their feet hurt and nobody checked? Theodore didn't answer. The number was too big to say without feeling sick. Theodore posted Bishop's transformation on a livestock forum that December. Before and after photos. The stone, the crack, the behavioral change in video. The post spread across cattle forums in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia. Veterinarians reposted it. Extension agents linked it. The message was simple and devastating. This bull was not aggressive. He was in pain. The treatment cost less than the auction price that would have sent him to slaughter. Theodore started getting calls. Farmers with bulls they couldn't handle. In the first year, he examined 31 bulls referred as aggressive. 22, 71%, had significant hoof pathology, stones, cracks, abscesses, overgrowth, all treatable, all painful, all invisible to anyone not looking at the feet. 19 of the 22 showed measurable behavioral improvement within 30 days of treatment, 86%. He wrote it up for the Ohio Cattlemen's Association newsletter, 1 sentence for the title. Before you sell the bull, check his feet. Theodore is 59 now. He trims 4 days a week, more work than he's had in a decade. His phone rings the way his father's phone used to ring in the 70s. Farmers calling from 3 counties away, asking if the hoofman can come look at a bull that nobody else will go near. He charges $60 per trim, less than the cost of a vet call, less than the cost of the diesel to haul a bull to auction, less than the salvage price of an animal that the sale barn would flag as aggressive, and the meat buyer would purchase for $1,200, and the processing plant would kill within a week. $60. The price of looking at the feet before giving up on the animal. Bishop stands in Theodore's pasture today. Sound. Calm. Bred 23 cows his first season with a 91% conception rate. His calves are heavy-boned and quiet. The disposition he's passing to them is the disposition he always had underneath the pain. Linda watches Theodore walk beside Bishop sometimes. The bull that nobody would get near, walking next to a 58-year-old man in the evening light of a Vinton County pasture. She told her sister, Theodore didn't save that bull with surgery. He saved him by looking where nobody else looked. 40 years his father taught him. And it came down to one bull that everybody saw as a monster, and Theodore saw as a patient. Some bulls are dangerous, and some are just standing on something that hurts, waiting for the one person in the room who knows the difference between a threat and a limp. Theodore Wiley is that person. His father was before him, and the only tool they needed was the willingness to get low enough to look at what everyone else was standing too high to see.